So who here likes to solve problems? Show of hands. Yeah, I hope everyone in this room actually likes to solve problems. And who here might actually consider yourself a pretty darn good problem solver? Yeah, me too. Good to know I'm among friends. I love solving problems, and for the most part, I'm pretty good at it. But the problem is, as leaders, as coaches, and frankly, as humans, we are far too much in the habit of telling rather than truly developing people's capability to solve problems. If we're looking at this continuum here, if we're on the left, showing up as the expert problem solver, who's owning the problem? You, the expert who's telling, showing up, advocating for your position. And if we're really wanting to develop capability in people, we need to start asking more questions to develop their capabilities as well. So what I'm here today is to share with you in the next less than 10 minutes 3 practices that I have put into place to personally get out of the habit of telling. And I actually use these each and every day because our habits run so strong. We are in this imbalance of asking and telling. And it's not that we need to stop telling. There's absolutely a time as leaders, as parents, and as people to tell and to advocate for our position, to set direction, to have a teachable moment, but we need to start asking more questions. So a little bit about my story around this. I grew up in academia where it was great to have the right answer. In fact, we all had this experience in our schooling where we moved from asking questions. Preschoolers ask 200 or more questions a day to their parents. And as a parent of a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, I can tell you that is absolutely true. But a study has shown that by the time we reach junior high school, that number of questions has dramatically dropped off. We're used to, in our schooling, to be rewarded for having the right answer. And that's the same thing in our careers as well. We are the expert problem solvers. But I switched into a role of being a lean consultant and then moved up into being a leader as well. And I realized that if I was really trying to develop other people's capability, I was really not doing what I intended to do when I was coming in and behind the scenes doing all the problem solving. It was fun for me, but it wasn't creating sustainability in my organization or the people I was working with. So I decided to put some intentional practice around starting to ask more questions, not showing up always having the answer. And I was doing a pretty good job. I might ask a question, but then, get caught up in the conversation, and I'd find that I was using the words, I think. And this is really the trigger, hey, I'm doing the thinking here. So I decided to do this practice that is very similar to what Mike was talking about earlier, and it's the first practice that I recommend here. It's taking a clarity pause and connecting with your intention in that moment. What are you trying to do, and how are you going to show up? Slowing things down, even if it's just for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, to say, how am I going to be most helpful in this situation? You might notice that there are some Japanese characters at the bottom here, and I actually moved to Japan 3 years ago. I'm back in California now, and there's a lot of other lean talks I could give about my time in Japan, but how it relates to this process of getting out of the habit of telling is that when I had to get business cards made, I didn't have business cards at the time, but you hand them out to every person you meet. I'd give out 200 tonight. I didn't have a logo for my business, so I said, put the word for intention on my business card, and this is what it showed. And after giving my card out to people, they would say, oh, that's a really profound word. And I say, yeah, intention, it's very profound. But I learned that there's a deeper meaning in Japanese for the word intention. This character on the left means heart, and the one on the right means direction. And so really, if we think about intention being our purpose and what's important inside, and then aligning our behavior and our words and our actions with that intention. So when I take a clarity pause, it is really about connecting with what is my purpose in that moment, and how do I align my behaviors to serve that purpose. So sometimes I actually own the problem, or I'm a parent and need to be very corrective and directive with my child. And in that case, telling is perfectly acceptable and the right way to behave. But more often than not, I'm really wanting to develop someone else's capability. And so it's better to be asking a question. So when I ground myself in that intention, it helps me be more effective as a coach and leader. So I've seen some great improvement, especially in my one-on-one sessions. I was putting good intention about having this clarity pause, which is actually a term I learned in Karen Martin's new book, but it's a practice I've been doing for years. And I was having dramatic decrease in the amount of times I heard myself say, I think, which was great. And I also, because I slowed myself down, like Mike was saying, I slowed myself down. My energy wasn't coming forward as much. I wasn't interrupting folks. And so I was really kind of congratulating myself of improving as getting out of the habit of telling. And then I had this experience where I was in this room filled with whiteboards. You all know the kind of room where we're having a little powwow session with my clients. There were 6 of us, 3 of us external consultants and three clients. And we've been working together for years, so we feel very comfortable with each other. And they turned to us and said, so, what do you guys think? How should we be planning out the next 6 months of this initiative we're working on? And what did we do? We jumped up, went right to the whiteboards and got into it. It was my expert problem solving just came out. I was so excited to be sharing ideas and working it out with them, and I had this out-of-body experience, like, whoa, you are so not connected with your intention on this. Your behavior is not aligned with what you're truly trying to do, which was help them think about a problem they owned. I and my fellow colleagues were starting to take over the ownership. So I actually called a timeout, had a little clarity pause mid-moment, and that's okay to self-correct. And I put in place the second task, or second tip, which is when someone asks you a question and they have ownership for a problem, don't immediately jump in with your thinking. Ask them a question about how they are starting to think about that problem first. More often than not, when someone asks you a question that they have been thinking about or have a problem to solve, they've done some thinking about it. And by asking a question, you can help pull out that thinking. The dynamic in the room changed dramatically when I asked that question. So how are you guys starting to think about it? They got up on the whiteboard and started writing it out. And we were able to be effective by asking some more questions and giving some insights from our previous experience. But they were owning the thinking. And the third thing that has really helped me get out of the habit of telling is to pay attention to the quality of my questions. This is a very weird looking animal because it is actually a wolf in sheep's clothing. We are in the habit of telling and we don't even know it most of the time. We are dressing up our ideas as questions, our ideas with a question mark on it. Pay attention to what comes out of your mouth tomorrow. You will be shocked and appalled. I can't even listen to myself sometimes. I have to correct myself often. I listen to the radio and I hear how many leading questions are said, how many yes or no questions. So if there are only 2 things that you take away from my talk tonight, I want them to be these words: what and how. If you ask a what or how question, you're more likely to be asking a coaching question that's really pulling in someone else's thinking. I self-correct all the time and think in my head, how can I be reframing what I want to say as a what or how question if I'm there truly in service of helping someone else develop their problem-solving thinking? And it's okay to self-correct in the moment. Always be thinking, if you're really there to help someone else, how can I ask a better and more effective question? So I want to leave you with 2 questions, of course, a what and a how question. So to set your intention for how you are going to improve at getting out of the habit of telling and becoming a more effective leader, and in fact, become a better employer, which is the focus of our whole conference here today. What is one thing you will practice with intention to get out of the habit of telling? And how will you know that you're improving? Because you have to measure it to know if you're personally improving. These little dolls are called Daruma dolls, which I picked up in Japan, and I have many here at the conference. And so if you find me and tell me the answers to this question about what you're thinking until I run out, I will have a Daruma doll for you to set your intention with your goal as well. So work on getting out of the habit of telling. I work in each and every day, and that's how we are really going to create organizations filled with problem solvers. Thank you.